You sit here now in the quiet before another year begins to press against you, the same quiet that has followed you through too many Decembers already. You tell yourself this time will be different, and part of you still believes it enough to keep coming back to the same promise. But belief without structure is only another form of delay. 9 minutes. That is all I ask. Not because 9 minutes contains magic, but because it is small enough that you cannot reasonably refuse it, and long enough that if you actually stay present, you will have to confront something you have spent years stepping around. Most years do not fail because the goals were too large. They fail because the first small refusal was allowed to stand. You said tomorrow, then tomorrow became next week. Then next week became after the holidays, and the holidays became another January full of the same quiet guilt. Look at your hands for a moment. They are the same hands that have signed every postponement. They are not evil. They are simply obedient to whatever you have trained them to obey. In the next few minutes, I will not give you a list of habits. I will not tell you to wake at 5 or cold shower or journal gratitude until your wrist hurts. Those are tools, and tools are neutral until the hand that holds them has decided what it really wants. What I want to examine with you slowly, without hurry, is why the decision itself keeps slipping. You already know the surface answer: distraction, fatigue, lack of willpower. Those are symptoms, not causes. The deeper answer is almost always one of two things, and usually both. Either you have not yet suffered enough from the consequences of your present course, or you still secretly believe that someone or something outside yourself will eventually rescue you from having to choose. Neither of those is rare. Both are human, and both can be ended not with force but with sustained, unsentimental clarity. Let us begin with the first. You have felt the sting of wasted time before. A birthday that arrived while the same goal sat untouched. A conversation in which someone asked what you had been working on, and the answer felt like a lie, even though it was technically true. The quiet burn when you scroll past people half your age who appear to have already decided who they will become. Those moments hurt, but pain alone does not produce change. Pain must be met with reflection, and reflection must be met with responsibility. Most people stop at pain. They feel it, name it, share it, medicate it, and then wait for the next cycle of motivation to arrive. That is not discipline. That is temperature taking. Discipline begins the moment you stop asking how you feel about a thing and begin asking what the thing requires of you. Right now, your mind is already offering excuses for why this conversation cannot matter. Too tired, already knows this. Will try again tomorrow when the conditions are better. Listen to those excuses without fighting them. Let them speak. They are not your enemy. They are evidence. They show exactly where the boundary of your present self-mastery lies. Every time you allow one of those thoughts to win without examination, you pay a small tax. The tax is not dramatic. No thunderclap. Just a fractional narrowing of the self you are still capable of becoming. Year after year, the fraction compounds until one morning you wake and realize the distance between who you are and who you once could have been is no longer bridgeable by hope alone. That is not tragedy in the poetic sense. It is arithmetic. 9 minutes is not long enough to reverse decades. It is long enough, however, to interrupt the arithmetic for one clean breath. So breathe. Not for calm, for accuracy. Feel the breath enter cold and leave warmer. That difference is proof you are still here, still capable of choice. The man who cannot feel the difference has already begun to die in small installments. Now consider this. The year 2026 is not coming to save you. It is coming to measure you. It will count every morning you rose, and every morning you did not. It will record every promise kept in silence and every promise broken in silence. It has no opinion. It simply tallies. You are the one who must live with the total. Most people fear that total. They fear it so much they prefer to never look at the ledger at all. They keep the books closed and call it optimism. But optimism without audit is delusion. Here is the harder truth. You already living the consequences of last year's choices. The body you carry, the mind you wrestle, the relationships you maintain or allow to wither, the bank account, the unread books, the unsent letters, the skills half acquired, every one of them is yesterday's vote made physical. 2026 will be no different. It will be the sum of what you vote between now and then. The only difference that has ever mattered is whether you vote consciously or by default. Default voting looks like this. You wake, feel the resistance, negotiate with it, lose, scroll, eat what is easy, consume what is loud, go to bed promising tomorrow will be different. Repeat. The vote is cast every time you choose comfort over clarity. Conscious voting looks different. Not heroic, not loud, just deliberate. You feel the resistance and do not negotiate. You name it. This is the old pattern. And then you act against it anyway. Not because you feel like it. Because you have decided the man you are becoming is worth more than the man you feel like being today. That decision is not made once. It is made every morning, every hour, every time the path forks. Most years you lose the vote early before breakfast and spend the rest of the day rationalizing the loss. This year I am asking you to win the first vote of the day for 9 consecutive minutes. Nothing more. 9 minutes of no negotiation. 9 minutes during which you refuse to let the default write the morning. Sit with that for a moment. 9 minutes is laughably small, which is precisely why it is dangerous to dismiss. If you cannot govern 9 minutes, what makes you believe you can govern 9 months? The mind will object, but after 9 minutes, everything will go back to normal. Perhaps. But normal is what brought you here. Normal is the problem. The point is not perfection after 9 minutes. The point is proof of concept. Proof that you can interrupt the automatic script. Once you have proof, even small proof, the entire story changes. You are no longer the man who cannot. You are the man who can for 9 minutes, and therefore can for longer if the decision is repeated. That is not motivation. That is logic. Logic is colder than feeling, and therefore more reliable. Feelings abandon you at dawn. Logic remains. So let us use logic now. You have approximately 525,600 minutes in 2026. 9 of them is 0.0017% of the year. If you cannot claim 0.0017% of your own time on purpose, then you do not own your time. Your time owns you. Ownership is not a slogan, it is a fact. You either decide what enters your attention or the world decides for you. There is no third option. In the next breath, I will ask you to do something very simple. Not inspiring. Not transformative. Simple. When the next impulse arrives to abandon this, whether it arrives in 30 seconds or 3 minutes, do not fight it. Observe it. Label it silently. This is the default trying to reassert control. Then return to the breath. Return to the fact that you are still here. Do that once, and you have already lengthened the chain of conscious choice by 1 link. Do it twice, and the chain is no longer fragile. By the 9th minute, the chain will not feel heroic. It will feel ordinary, and that is the moment the real danger begins. Because ordinary is when most people stop. Ordinary is the threshold between dabbling and becoming. Stay past ordinary. The year is waiting to be written, but it will not write itself in your favor unless you first write yourself in small, deliberate strokes. 9 minutes is the first stroke. Make it count. You felt the first 9 minutes pass. Perhaps they passed in resistance, perhaps in fragile obedience. Either way, they passed, and here you are still seated, still listening, still not quite escaped. That alone is already more than most allow themselves. The danger now is not failure. The danger is relief. Relief whispers that the hard part is over, that you have paid your small toll and can now return to the familiar drift. Relief is the most seductive form of betrayal because it arrives dressed as mercy. Do not trust it. What you just did for 9 minutes was not a gift to the year ahead. It was a theft from the default. You stole back a fragment of your own attention. The default does not forget theft. It will return, more patient, more familiar, wearing the face of reason. You already did the thing today. Rest now. Tomorrow you can do more. Tomorrow rarely arrives for the man who negotiates today. Consider the nature of what you are actually fighting. It is not laziness in the childish sense. It is a deeper loyalty to an older version of yourself that learned long ago that safety lies in small surrenders. That version was not wrong then. It kept you alive through seasons when full resistance would have broken you, but it does not know that the season has changed. It still believes postponement is protection. You must tell it otherwise, not with anger, not with speeches to yourself in the mirror, with repeated, quiet refusals that accumulate into evidence even the oldest part of you cannot ignore. In this next stretch of time, widen the lens slightly. Look not at the single morning, but at the architecture of the year that is forming around you right now. Every day contains roughly the same number of discretionary minutes, though not claimed by sleep, work, obligations that cannot be avoided. Within those minutes lies the difference between a year remembered as the one I finally became serious and a year filed under another one that got away. The tragedy is not that the minutes disappear. The tragedy is that they disappear in increments so small they feel like nothing at all. 5 minutes here, 15 there, an hour lost to a screen that promised 5 more minutes of distraction. Each increment votes. By December, the votes are tallied and the ballot is closed. You cannot unvote what has already been cast, but you can change how you vote from this breath forward. Here is where most men falter. They wait for certainty before they act. They want to feel ready, motivated, aligned, clear-headed, supported by perfect conditions. They confuse prerequisite with permission. Permission is never granted by feeling, it is granted by decision. Decision is colder. It says, I do not feel like it, I do not see the path clearly, the resistance is loud, and still I choose. That choice is the fulcrum. Everything pivots on whether you learn to make it without fanfare. Right now your mind is scanning for exceptions. It is already drafting the clause that will let you out of this conversation. But I have responsibilities. But I am exhausted. But this is too abstract. But 9 minutes isn't real change. Listen to the clause without interrupting it. Let it finish its sentence. Then answer it with one question only. Does this excuse change the arithmetic? The arithmetic does not care about your reason. It counts presence or absence. If you are absent from your own choices, the year records absence. No appeal, no explanation section on the form. You may feel that this is unforgiving. It is. Forgiveness belongs to the past. The future does not forgive. It simply arrives and shows you what you built. So build, not with grand gestures that exhaust you by noon, with micro-ownership. In the next breath, choose one small thing, something so small it embarrasses the part of you that wants drama. Choose to sit upright instead of slouching. Choose to keep your eyes on this page instead of flicking to another tab. Choose to draw one slow breath without letting the mind wander to tomorrow's to-do list. Do it now. Feel how tiny the act is. Feel also how the default hates even that small seizure of control. It will offer boredom, restlessness, the sudden need to stretch or check the time. Those are not needs. They are negotiation. Refuse the negotiation by returning to the chosen act. Not once. Not twice, as many times as it takes until the impulse to flee exhausts itself. This is self-mastery in its least glamorous form, repetition until refusal becomes reflex. Most people never reach this stage because they demand inspiration first. Inspiration is intermittent. Reflex is reliable. Build the reflex in small sets. 9 minutes. Then another 9 when the memory is still fresh. Then another when the day tries to bury it under routine. Each completed set etches a deeper groove. The groove is identity, not the loud identity of slogans and affirmations. The quiet identity that says, this is who I am now. I no longer ask permission from feeling. Identity is not declared. It is demonstrated. You demonstrate it every time you stay when the impulse is to leave, every time you choose the harder silence over the easier noise, every time you refuse to let the day write itself. The year 2026 is not abstract. It is this moment multiplied by 365. If this moment is surrendered, the year is surrendered in advance. But if this moment is claimed even imperfectly, even with tremor, the year begins to bend toward you, not because the universe rewards virtue, because attention compounds. What you attend to grows, what you neglect atrophies. Attend, then, to the small vote. Attend without sentiment. Attend as a man attending to the sharpening of his own blade, not for glory, but because a dull blade is useless when the work arrives. The work will arrive. Life does not ask if you are ready. It asks only what you have prepared. Prepare in the minutes no one sees. They are the only minutes that matter. You have carried the small theft forward now. A few more minutes claimed, perhaps not perfectly, perhaps with the mind wandering twice or three times before you pulled it back. That is not failure. That is the raw material of mastery. Imperfection met with persistence instead of apology. The mind wants to congratulate itself here. It wants to say, see, you did it again. You're changing. Do not let it speak that way. Praise is another negotiation. It softens the edge you need sharp. Instead, note the fact with that adjective. Another segment of time was governed, not gifted away. Now turn the gaze inward a little further. Not to the actions, but to the identity that performs them. Most men live in a quiet civil war between who they say they are and who their days prove they are. The saying is loud at the beginning of January resolutions spoken to friends, posted in quiet corners of the internet, whispered in the dark before sleep. The proving is silent and relentless. By March, the war is usually over, and the days have won. You feel the tension of that war every time you sit to do the thing you promised yourself, and instead reach for the easier thing. The reach is not laziness. It is loyalty to an identity that has served you longer than the new one you claim to want. That older identity is not your enemy. It was built brick by brick from necessity. Avoid pain by avoiding effort. Preserve energy by preserving the status quo. Survive criticism by never fully committing. It kept the boy alive. Now it keeps the man small. To dismantle it without cruelty requires something colder than willpower, recognition without mercy. Recognition, this is who I have been. Without mercy, this is no longer sufficient. The bridge between the two statements is not emotion. It is repetition of the new proof. Every time you choose the deliberate act over the default one, you deposit a vote in the ledger of the emerging self. One vote does not rewrite the Constitution. 1,000 might, but you do not need 1,000 today. You need 9 more. Then 9 more after that. In this stretch, examine the precise moment when the choice appears. It is never vague. It arrives as a fork. Left, continue reading, continue breathing deliberately, continue sitting without fidgeting. Right, check the phone. Stand to get water you do not need. Remember an urgent task that can wait. The fork lasts perhaps 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, the entire year is decided not in drama but in direction. Most lives turn not on great crises, but on these micro-forks repeated until the path is worn deep. You have trained yourself over years to take the right fork almost automatically. The training was unintentional but effective. Now retrain intentionally, slowly, without self-pity. When the fork arrives next, and it will, within the next minute, you stay present. Name it aloud in your mind. Here is the fork. Do not argue with it. Do not moralize. Simply name it, then step left. Step left once, proof. Step left twice, pattern. Step left 10 times in a day, identity beginning to shift. The shift is not felt as lightning. It is felt as unfamiliarity. The body will protest the unfamiliar as danger. Your heart rate may rise slightly. Your thoughts will offer reasons why left is unnecessary today. That protest is the old identity defending its territory. Do not suppress the protest. Let it speak its piece, then step left anyway. This is emotional restraint in its plainest form, feeling the pull and not following it. Restraint is not the absence of desire. It is the presence of decision stronger than desire. You do not become free by never wanting. You become free by wanting and choosing not to take. That freedom is what separates the year that is merely survived from the year that is shaped. Shaped does not mean perfect, it means intentional. Intentionality is expensive. It costs comfort in the short hour. It repays in the long decade. Most men bankrupt themselves early by spending all their intentionality on the wrong ledger: outrage at the news, defense of opinions no one asked for, consumption of drama that belongs to strangers. They arrive at December exhausted, having spent their finite resource on what does not compound. You have only so much deliberate attention per day. Guard it the way a man guards the last water in a desert, not out of fear, but out of knowledge that thirst comes whether you acknowledge it or not. In the next breath, practice the guard. Feel the impulse rise, perhaps to shift posture, perhaps to let the eyes drift, perhaps to replay a conversation from earlier today. Feel it fully. Then, without haste or force, return to this moment. Return to the choice that is still available. Each return is a deposit. The account grows quietly. By the end of these 9 minutes, the balance will be higher than when you began, not in dramatic sum, but in demonstrated capacity. Capacity is the true currency of self-mastery, not talent, not intelligence. Capacity to remain present when presence is inconvenient. Capacity to choose when choice is costly. Capacity to continue when continuation feels pointless. 2026 will not ask for your talent. It will ask for your capacity. If you have spent the year building it in small, unglamorous increments, you will meet its demands without panic. If you have spent the year spending it elsewhere, you will meet January 1 already overdrawn. The overdraft notice arrives in March, when the first real obstacle appears. Most men fold then, not because the obstacle is insurmountable, but because they have no reserve left. Build the reserve now. Not in hours, in minutes stolen back, one fork at a time. There is no shortcut. There is only this: the next fork is coming. Name it. Choose left. Do that, and the man who enters 2026 will already be different from the one who enters this conversation. Not transformed, not enlightened. Simply more practiced at owning his own direction. That practice is the only preparation that matters. You have now walked through 3 segments of deliberate choice, each one small, each one resisted, each one completed not with triumph, but with the plain fact of completion. The mind may already be whispering that this is enough for one sitting, that you have proven the point. Listen to the whisper. Do not answer it yet. Let it hang in the air like smoke, then watch how long it takes to dissipate when ignored. The temptation at this stage is to collect the small wins like trophies and place them on a shelf called progress. Do not. Progress is not a collection. It is a direction that must be maintained under increasing load. The load is not yet heavy. It will become heavier. Turn now to the quiet architecture of identity itself. Not the identity you announce, not the one you wish for in quiet moments, but the one that is being forged right now, minute by minute, in the choices no one witnesses. Identity is not a declaration. It is sediment, layer upon layer of what you actually did when the fork appeared. The man who says, "I am disciplined," but folds at the first discomfort, is building a different sediment. The sediment of self-betrayal dressed as realism. The man who says little but repeatedly chooses the harder path is building something else, the sediment of reliability to himself. You feel the difference already, even if it is faint. A slight straightening in the spine when the impulse to shift arises and you do not follow it. A momentary silence in the mind where negotiation used to live. These are not feelings to celebrate. They are data points Data that says the older sediment is being covered slowly by the new. Covering does not erase. The old layers remain beneath. On days when fatigue or disappointment arrives, and they will arrive, the old sediment will push upward, offering familiar paths. You tried. Rest now. You deserve it. Deserve is a dangerous word here. It implies entitlement earned by past effort. But effort does not earn rest from discipline. It earns the capacity to continue discipline when rest would be sweeter. This is where delayed gratification reveals its true cost, not the glamorous postponement of pleasure for future reward. The mundane, grinding postponement of relief when relief is closest, when the body says enough, when the mind says you've done your part, when the clock says no one would blame you. That is the precise moment the sediment thickens or erodes. Most years erode here. The man reaches March or April, encounters the first serious friction, a setback at work, a family demand, a week of poor sleep, and the sediment crumbles because it was never compacted deeply enough. He returns to the default not because he is weak, but because the default was still the thicker layer. Your task is compaction, not in dramatic compressions. In steady, even pressure applied without variation. In this next interval, apply that pressure directly to one persistent leak. The moment you allow the mind to drift into future planning as escape, you know the pattern. Resistance appears. Instead of naming it and returning, the mind says, "Fine, I'll do this later. Let me first think about how I'll structure tomorrow, the week, the year." Planning becomes procrastination, wearing ambition's clothes. It feels productive. It is evasion. Catch it now. The next time the thought arises, "After this I'll plan my routine," interrupt it. Not with force, with a single question placed between you and the thought. Am I planning or am I fleeing? If the honest answer is fleeing, return. Return to the breath, to the posture, to the single line you are reading. Return without self-reproach. Reproach is another escape hatch. It lets you feel something instead of doing something. This return is responsibility in miniature. You are responsible not for perfection, but for the direction of attention after the lapse. The lapse will happen. The return determines everything. Responsibility is not guilt. Guilt is backward-looking and paralyzing. Responsibility is forward-looking and orienting. It says that happened. Now what? And the answer is always the same. Return. Each return compacts the layer a fraction more. After dozens of returns in a day, the layer hardens. After hundreds across weeks, it becomes difficult to penetrate. After thousands across months, the default must work much harder to reach the surface. 2026 does not care about your intentions. It cares about the sediment you bring into it. If the sediment is mostly default, the year will feel like repetition. If the sediment is increasingly deliberate, the year will feel like consequence of choices made when no one was watching. Consequence is freedom's other name. Not the freedom of no limits. The freedom of knowing your limits are self-imposed and therefore removable by the same self. Remove them slowly. Remove them by refusing to let the mind use tomorrow as today's alibi. Tomorrow is not yours yet. Today is. Claim it in the increments available. In the next breath, test the claim. Feel whatever impulse is rising: boredom, doubt, the subtle ache of sustained attention. Name it without drama. This is the old layer pressing. Then decide, return or release. If you release, the layer remains soft. If you return, it compresses. Compression is silent work, no applause, no visible marker. Only the accumulating fact that you are no longer the man who flees at the first signal of discomfort. That accumulating fact is identity, not proclaimed, demonstrated. Demonstrate it now, in this minute, then in the next, then across the day. The year is built from such demonstrations, not from announcements, and the man who demonstrates consistently enters the new year not hoping for change, but carrying it already in the weight and density of his own sediment. Carry it forward. You have now passed the midpoint of these minutes. 4 segments claimed, each one leaving a faint but accumulating residue of choice. The residue is not yet armor. It is still thin, still vulnerable to the first serious wave of fatigue or distraction, yet it exists. That existence alone shifts the ground beneath you slightly. The default can no longer assume automatic victory. It must now contend with a small but real precedent. This is where the real test of self-mastery begins, not in the easy repetitions, but in the moment when the precedent feels insufficient against the rising pressure of ordinary life. Ordinary life does not arrive as catastrophe. It arrives as Tuesday, as the same alarm, the same obligations, the same body carrying the same accumulated weariness. In that ordinariness, the older sediment reasserts itself most convincingly. You've done enough for one day. The year is long. Pace yourself. Pacing is another word for postponement when it is used to justify release. True pacing knows the terrain ahead and conserves only what must be conserved to reach the end. False pacing conserves comfort at the expense of direction. You are not yet at the terrain that demands true pacing. You are still on the flat stretch where comfort is most tempting because the horizon still looks distant and forgiving. This is precisely the stretch where most men lose the year. They do not collapse under weight. They drift under lightness. Drift is subtle. It does not announce itself with guilt or despair. It announces itself with reasonable excuses that accumulate into habit. I'll start properly tomorrow. I need to recharge first. I'm not in the right headspace. Each excuse is a vote cast backward toward the man you no longer wish to be. The votes are quiet. No one hears them but you. By evening the tally is clear and the sediment softens again. To prevent softening requires something sterner than motivation, inner silence. Inner silence is not the absence of thought. It is the refusal to let thought become conversation. When the excuse arises, do not debate it. Do not rationalize against it. Do not bargain. Simply note its arrival excuse and let it pass without further engagement. Like a cloud crossing the sky does not argue with clouds. It remains sky. Most minds turn every cloud into a storm by engaging it. Engagement gives the cloud substance. Silence starves it. Practice that silence now. The next impulse toward drift will arrive soon, perhaps as a subtle boredom, perhaps as a memory of unfinished business elsewhere, perhaps as the quiet suggestion that this listening has gone on long enough. When it arrives, do not meet it with words. Meet it with observation without commentary. Observe the impulse rise, peak, and begin to fade. Do not push it away. Do not pull it closer. Let it move through untouched. In that untouched passage lies one of the deepest forms of self-control, the control that does not need to prove itself by fighting. Fighting the impulse gives it equal status. Silence denies its status altogether. This denial is not suppression. Suppression buries the impulse alive. It waits underground and returns stronger. Silence lets it pass because it recognizes no authority in what is transient. You have spent years granting authority to every passing thought, every mood, every whim, every half-formed justification. No wonder the self feels fragmented. You have been a democracy of impulses instead of a sovereignty of decision. Sovereignty begins when you revoke the voting rights of what is impermanent, not with violence, with consistent non-engagement. Non-engagement is difficult because it feels like inaction. The mind equates action with noise, with argument, with planning, with forceful redirection. But the most powerful action is often the refusal to act on what does not serve the direction. In this next minute, exercise that refusal directly. Feel whatever is pulling now: restlessness, doubt, the subtle promise of relief if you stop. Observe it fully. Then revoke its vote. No debate, no justification, no counterthought. Simply return to presence. The return itself is the sovereignty asserted. Each such assertion thickens the sediment further, not dramatically, not with fireworks, with the patient accumulation of moments where the default was met and passed over without ceremony. By the time these 9 minutes end, you will have a small but measurable territory reclaimed, not the whole kingdom. A single reliable outpost. From that outpost the rest can be expanded methodically, without hurry, without self-congratulation. The year 2026 will test whether that outpost holds. It will send ordinary days like scouts to probe its walls. If the walls are built only of initial enthusiasm, they will crumble at the first prolonged siege of routine. If they are built of repeated, silent refusals, they will stand not because they are invincible, but because they have learned to ignore what does not merit response. Ignore, then, not out of arrogance, out of economy. Attention is finite. Spend it only on what compounds identity rather than erodes it. The compounding happens in silence, in the spaces where no excuse is entertained, in the breaths where drift is noticed and allowed to die of neglect. Let the next drift arrive. Notice it. Allow it to die. In its death, another small layer hardens. Another vote cast for the man who no longer asks permission from passing clouds. That man does not need the year to be his best. He enters it already carrying the best version available to him at that moment. The rest is simply continuation. Continue. You have now held the line through 5 segments. The holding has not been flawless. There have been drifts, small negotiations, moments when the silence was broken by a fleeting justification, but the line still holds. Not because you are stronger than the pull, but because you have refused again and again to let the refusal itself become another story you tell yourself. That refusal is beginning to feel less like effort and more like posture, the natural stance of a man who no longer leans toward every passing wind. This posture changes the terrain. What once felt like climbing now begins to feel like walking on level ground that you yourself leveled. The novelty has worn off. The initial spark of "I can do this" has dimmed into something quiet. "I am doing this." Quiet is dangerous here. In quiet, the mind seeks entertainment, seeks meaning, seeks anything to fill the space where drama used to live. It will offer you questions disguised as profundity. Is this really changing anything? Shouldn't I feel more different by now? Am I just going through motions? These are not inquiries. They are invitations to reopen debate. Debate returns you to the old democracy of impulses. Close the parliament. There is only one motion on the floor. Continue. Continuation without commentary is one of the purest expressions of self-mastery. It requires no audience, no validation, no internal narrator applauding or critiquing. It simply is, like the river that does not announce its flow but flows anyway. The river does not pause to ask if its current is meaningful. It moves because movement is its nature once the channel is cut. You are cutting that channel now. Each completed minute deepens it a fraction. The fraction seems insignificant until you look backward. 5 segments ago, the channel was barely a scratch. Now it can carry a steady stream, if you do not allow sediment to clog it again. The primary way sediment returns is through premature evaluation. You stop to assess, how far have I come? Is the resistance less? Am I becoming the man I imagined? Assessment interrupts flow. It pulls attention from the act to the story of the act. The story is always premature and usually inaccurate. The only accurate measure is whether you are still moving forward in this breath. In this next interval, forbid assessment. When the mind offers a progress report, positive or negative, treat it as noise from a distant room. Do not enter the room. Do not close the door in anger. Simply note, report, and let the sound fade while you remain in the corridor of presence. This non-engagement with self-observation is subtle warfare against the ego. The ego thrives on narrative. It wants to be the hero, the victim. Sage, the struggler, anything but the anonymous worker. Strip it of narrative by refusing to narrate. Let the work be nameless for a while. Nameless work is the most potent, because no one can steal credit from it, not even you. The year ahead will demand much nameless work. Mornings when no one sees. Evenings when fatigue makes every choice feel heavy. Decisions made alone in rooms no one enters. If you have trained only in named work, the kind that comes with visible market likes, acknowledgments, you will falter when the name is removed. Train now in anonymity. Let these minutes be practice in acting without witness, without scorecard, without the promise of feeling transformed. Transformation is a byproduct, not a goal. Chasing it directly produces strain, and strain produces excuses. Act without chasing. The byproduct arrives when it arrives, often long after you stopped looking for it. Right now, the mind may be restless because the novelty has faded and no grand revelation has appeared. Restlessness is the ego's last reliable weapon when drama fails. It creates artificial urgency. This is taking too long. Something must be wrong. I need to feel progress or I'll stop. Observe that urgency without supplying fuel. Urgency is a sensation, not a directive, like hunger before a meal that is already prepared. The meal is continuation. Feed it by continuing, not by feeding the urgency. In the next breath, meet the restlessness directly. Feel its texture, tightness in the chest, flicker in the thoughts, subtle urge to shift or conclude. Do not label it good or bad. Do not try to dissolve it. Hold it in awareness the way you hold a stone in your hand, present, solid, unmoving. Then set the stone down not by force, but by redirecting attention to the single next act available, reading the next word, drawing the next breath, maintaining the next posture. This redirection without drama is delayed gratification at its core, not waiting for ice cream after vegetables, waiting for nothing. Choosing the plain act now instead of the stimulated state later. Choosing silence over stimulation. Choosing direction over distraction even when direction feels empty of fireworks. Emptiness is not enemy. Emptiness is the space where real identity forms, away from the noise of approval, away from the drama of struggle, away from the illusion of constant becoming. In emptiness the sediment settles without interference. Let it settle. The man who can sit in emptiness without filling it with story is the man who can endure the long stretches of 2026 without losing course. Most lose course because they demand constant evidence that the course is correct. Evidence is intermittent. The course must be held regardless. Hold it now, through the next minute, through the quiet that follows the restlessness, through the ordinary seconds that feel like nothing at all. Ordinary seconds are the forge. In them the blade is tempered not by heat alone, but by patient, repeated cooling and reheating. Your ordinary seconds are cooling the old patterns and reheating the new one, the one that continues without needing to explain why. Continue without explanation. The explanation comes later, if it comes at all, usually in the form of a life that no longer needs excuses. That life is not guaranteed. It is earned in these unglamorous increments. Earn them. You have now traversed 6 segments without breaking the thread. The thread is no longer a fragile experiment. It has begun to acquire the character of habit, not the shallow habit of routine, but the deeper habit of character. Character is what remains when motivation has long since departed and novelty has turned to dust. You are beginning to meet that dust. The air is drier here. The landscape flatter. No peaks of insight, no valleys of despair. Just the steady walk forward through what feels increasingly like nothing at all. This nothing is the crucible. Most men abandon the path precisely when it becomes nothing, when the resistance no longer roars but murmurs, when the rewards no longer shimmer but recede into ordinary gray. They mistake the gray for failure. It is not failure. It is maturation. The boy wants fireworks. The man learns to walk in twilight without complaint. In this twilight, the final illusions are stripped away. One of the last and most stubborn is the belief that discipline should feel noble. You may still carry a faint expectation that sustained choice will eventually produce a steady glow of inner satisfaction, a quiet pride that accompanies you through the day like a faithful companion. Release that expectation. Discipline, when it matures, feels neutral, not punishing, not rewarding. Neutral like breathing after the body has adapted to altitude. The lungs no longer burn, they simply work. You no longer feel heroic for continuing. You simply continue because the alternative has become foreign. Foreignness is the marker of real shift. The default once felt like home, comfortable, automatic, safe in its familiarity. Now the default, when it beckons, feels slightly off-key, a garment that no longer fits quite right, a room you once lived in but would not choose again. That slight off-key sensation is progress made physical. Do not seek to amplify it into emotion. Note it, then walk past it. Walking past requires one final deepening of inner silence, the silence that no longer even notes the passing of old patterns. Earlier you observed impulses, named them, let them fade. Now go further. When the old whisper arises subtle, almost polite, do not acknowledge its arrival. Do not grant it the dignity of observation. Treat it as background wind. Wind moves the leaves. It does not move the mountain. You are becoming the mountain. Not through force or declaration, but through the patient refusal to be moved by what is transient. Transience includes not only distraction and excuse, but also the subtler transience, the memory of earlier success, the anticipation of future difficulty, the quiet demand for meaning in every moment. All of these are wind. Let them blow. The mountain remains. In the next interval, practice mountain stillness directly. Feel the body where it is, posture, breath, the faint weight of hands or arms. Feel the mind where it tries to go forward to planning, backward to review, sideways to fantasy or worry. Do not pursue any of those directions. Do not resist them. Remain as the unmoved center while the mind swirls at the edges. The swirl will tire itself. It always does when given no anchor to cling to. This non-anchoring is responsibility at its deepest level. You are responsible for what you attend to. You are also responsible for what you refuse to attend to. Refusal here is not denial. It is discernment. This thought does not serve the direction, therefore it receives no harbor. Discernment without emotion is the mark of self-mastery entering adulthood. The adolescent self demands that every choice feel charged either with struggle or with ecstasy. The adult self knows that most true choices feel plain. Plain does not mean insignificant, it means reliable. Reliable is what endures when the year turns difficult. 2026 will bring difficulty, not spectacular tragedy necessarily, but the ordinary difficulties that compound illness that lingers, relationships that strain without drama, work that demands more than it returns, energy that ebbs without clear cause. In those seasons, the man who has trained only in dramatic discipline will falter. He will look for the old fire to rekindle him and find only ash. The man who has trained in plain continuation will simply continue because continuation has become his nature, not his performance. Make continuation your nature now, in this minute, in the minute after, through the gray that feels empty but is actually filling. The filling is invisible, no sudden clarity, no voice from within saying you have arrived, only the accumulating absence of negotiation. The absence grows until one day you notice without fanfare that the fork no longer appears so sharply. The default path has narrowed to a faint trail beside the main road you now walk. You see it. You do not turn toward it, not out of willpower, out of irrelevance. Irrelevance is freedom's final form, not the loud freedom of breaking chains, the quiet freedom of no longer needing to break them because they no longer bind. You are not there yet, but you are walking the path that leads there. The path is ordinary. The destination is ordinary to a life shaped not by peaks, but by consistent direction. Consistent direction requires only one thing left, persistence through plainness. Persist now, through the minute that feels like nothing, through the breath that carries no revelation, through the silence that asks nothing of you except to remain. Remain. The man who remains through nothing becomes capable of remaining through anything. That capability is what 2026 will meet, not a seeker of best years, but a man already built for whatever year arrives. Build quietly. The year is listening. You have now carried this thread through 7 segments. The carrying has become less a matter of will and more a matter of being. Not enlightenment, not arrival, simply the steady absence of fracture. The mind no longer races to fill every pause with justification or forecast. The body no longer shifts at the first whisper of discomfort. What remains is plain presence, unadorned, uncelebrated, sufficient. This sufficiency is the quiet harvest of the minutes you refuse to surrender. Not a loud victory, not a transformed self beaming with certainty, a self that has learned, through repetition without fanfare, that it can remain when remaining is the only task. The task is complete in its incompleteness. There is no final bell, no certificate, no moment when the work declares itself finished. There is only the next breath, the next fork, the next ordinary second asking the same question: will you stay? Stay. In this final stretch, turn the gaze not outward to the year, not inward to the sediment, but to the simple fact of continuation itself. Continuation is not glamorous because it asks nothing dramatic of you. It asks only that you do not stop, not because stopping would be catastrophic today, because stopping would reopen the old ledger, the one where every lapse was excused, every return delayed, every promise to tomorrow left unpaid. You have begun to close that ledger, not by tearing it out, by writing in it so consistently that the old entries lose their authority through irrelevance. Irrelevance is earned. It is paid for in the currency of small, repeated no's to what once ruled. Each no was quiet. Each no cost comfort. Each no added a fraction to the distance between the man you were and the man who now chooses without needing to explain the choice. Explanation is the last luxury you can afford to keep. When the year turns hard, and it will, in ways both predictable and unforeseen, you will have no time for elaborate reasons why you should continue. You will have only the precedent: I continued before. I can continue now. Precedent is colder than reason, and therefore more durable. Durability is what separates the man who hopes for a good year from the man who is prepared to meet any year. Hope is fragile, it bends under pressure. Preparation is dense, it absorbs pressure without complaint. You have spent these minutes preparing, not by acquiring new techniques, not by memorizing principles, but by demonstrating to yourself, in the smallest arena possible, that you can hold course when nothing external demands it. That demonstration is the foundation. Build the rest of 2026 upon it the same way, one deliberate choice at a time, one refusal at a time, one return at a time. When fatigue arrives, do not negotiate with it, note it and continue. When doubt arrives, do not debate it, note it and continue. When the ordinary days stretch into weeks without visible reward, do not seek reward, continue. Continuation without reward is the truest form of responsibility. You are responsible not for outcomes you cannot control, but for the direction of your attention in the moments you can. Direct it now, direct it tomorrow, direct it when the calendar says January, when it says April, when it says the sleepless night in August. The direction compounds. The man who directs consistently becomes unrecognizable, not because he changed overnight, but because he never permitted the change to be interrupted. The year ahead will not be your best because it is merciful or because the stars align. It will be your best if it is, because you have already begun to make yourself the kind of man who can claim it without apology. Claim it not by declaration. Claim it by living the claim in every unglamorous minute that remains. These 9 minutes are ending. They were never meant to be magic. They were meant to be evidence. You now carry that evidence inside the posture you hold, inside the silence you maintain, inside the simple fact that you stayed until the end. Carry it forward, not as a trophy, as a quiet, unshakable precedent. And when the next year begins to press, when the old patterns try to whisper their familiar excuses, remember this: you have already proven they do not have the final word. Let the proof speak for itself. In silence, in continuation, in the life you build one deliberate breath at a time. Return to your day now, not with fanfare, but with the calm knowledge that the work does not stop here. It simply continues beyond these words, beyond this moment, in every choice that follows. Keep choosing, keep returning, keep building. This is how a man is built by Stoicism, not in grand gestures, but in the patient, ordinary work of never quite stopping.